The money is the big problem. And I feel like Bernie Sanders told us this. Bernie Sanders told us this. And now we have people pretending like this is not an issue. It's an issue. That is the number one problem. And that problem, if you don't get the money out, nothing will change. I just wish more people would say that. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to tell you guys to go donate money to candidates. I'm not going to do that. All right, let's get into this AOC story because we got to talk about this. And this actually will show you exactly what I was talking about. So a subscriber sent this to me. Thank you so much for doing that. AOC had an interview with New York Magazine. There is one part here that I want to show you that is incredibly important. Is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez an insider now? After 3 years of the halls of power, she's seen the shit show up close and hasn't given up on her vision for how to change it. Let me tell you something a little bit about her vision, because this is the part, the person who sent this to me, this is the part that they emphasized. So let me scroll down. Here we go. I'm going to make this large because I want all of you to see this, because this is not something that Sabby is assuming. This is right here. Go away in this article. Okay. Oh, where did it go? Hold on. Here we go. When you are asked questions about whether or not Nancy Pelosi should stay as speaker, pay close attention here, guys. Here we go. When you're asked questions about the rather advanced ages of Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, and Chuck Schumer, does it make a difference? You're saying it's structural, it's not generational. This is AOC's response. It's both. The reason we have this generational situation that we do is also in part due to our structures. The generational aspect of things is absolutely pertinent to the kind of decision making. There is this worldview, this appeal of a time past that I think sometimes guides decision making. President Biden thought that he could talk with Manchin like an old pal and bring him along. And frankly, that was what the White House strategy was in terms of what they communicated to us. That's how they tried to sell passage of not even half a loaf, but a tenth of a loaf. It was, we promise we'll be able to bring them along. There is this idea that this is just a temporary thing and we'll get back to that. But I grew up my entire life in this mess. There's no nostalgia for a time when Washington worked for my life. That's not completely true. I'm going to get into that story in just a second. That is not completely true. Here's the kicker. Is it healthy or not for the Democratic Party for Nancy Pelosi to remain in place as the speaker, as leader of the Democratic caucus in the House? Hold on to your seats for this one. It's really all about a specific moment that we're in. We are in such a delicate moment of the day today, particularly with the threats to our democracy. I believe that at the end of the day, there's going to be a generational change in our leadership. That is just a simple fact. Now, when that particular moment happens, I think it's a larger question of conditions and circumstance. You guys see this? Is it healthy or not for the Democratic Party for Nancy Pelosi to remain in place as the speaker? Yes or no? Yes or no? Notice how she kind of skirted around that. She didn't really give a yes or no. Look at this word salad. We are in such a delicate moment of the day to day, particularly with the threats to our democracy. No one asked you about that. He asked you a simple question, a straightforward question. Now, when that particular moment happens, I think it's a larger question of conditions and circumstance. Guys, she's playing you. They go on to say, you don't want to go near this one. Her response is, it's a tough question. Is that a tough question? I'm going to ask you guys, hold on. Is that a tough question? Let me ask you guys, do you think it is healthy for Nancy Pelosi to remain Speaker of the House? I'll look to the chat. I just don't understand. How is that a tough question? Didn't seem tough to me. Didn't seem tough to me. Comrade Cam says no. No, I'm looking at the answers. I'm looking at the answers in the chat. You guys are like, no. Let's go back in. Justin said she's giving all the answers or non-answers a compromised rep would make. Exactly. She's careful with what she says because she doesn't want to jeopardize her political career. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. Let's go back in. You don't want to go near this one. She says, it's a tough question. It's not even just a question of the speaker. It's a question of our caucus. I wish the Democratic Party had more stones. I wish our party was capable of truly supporting bold leadership that can address root causes. Do you guys see this? I wish the Democratic Party had more stones. You already have enough progressives in the House to make change with legislation, and you're not doing it. Do you see? You guys see what's happening here? The Democratic Party has a lot of power. She's asking for more stones. You got all the people, the numbers that you need right now to vote no or yes, where you could have really changed the outcome of legislation, the Capitol Police budget, forcing the vote, and you've done nothing. So now it's the party's fault. You see what I mean? It's a tough question. They go on to say, is it that representatives don't have the stones, or do you want a different public option, as it were? In other words, for example, take defund the police as a policy demand. Certainly in New York City, no one is talking about that now as a matter of protest. Yes. As activism? Yes. But we have a new mayor, Eric Adams, who is anything but defund the police. Who are you disappointed in? She goes on to say, I'm still disappointed in leadership and in my colleagues because ultimately these conversations about defund or this, that, or the other are what is happening in public and popular conversations. Our job is to be able to engage in that conversation, to read what is happening, and to be able to develop a vision and translate it into a course of action. All too often, I believe that a lot of our decisions are reactive to public discourse instead of responsive to public discourse. And so just because there's this large conversation about defund the police coming from the streets, the response was to immediately respond to it with fear, with poo-pooing, with this isn't us, with an arm's distance. So then what is the vision? That's where I think the party struggles. So again, AOC, if you feel that way, if you feel so strongly about defund the police, why aren't you out there backing Cori Bush? Why is Cori Bush standing alone? This is just, I can't make this up. Now I want to show you something because there was something that she said that just really irked me, and I had a feeling this was going to come up. I want to remind you who AOC really is, because when AOC was running for office, they talked about her being this bartender. Now, for those of you who don't know, I worked at Boston University until last month, actually. So I knew a little bit more about her because she went to BU than some of you did. Even some of you that watched independent media, because there were parts that were kind of hidden in reference to her background that those of us who were kind of local, we kind of knew. Those of us in the BU community kind of knew because she was an alum. Listen to this. The truth about AOC. The inside story of how in just 1 year, Sandy, the bartender, became a lawmaker who triggers both parties. You see what I mean? Sandy, the bartender. This was the story they led with when talking about AOC. She was a bartender. She grew up in the Bronx. I happen to know differently. Listen to this. AOC was a bartender when she pulled together a scrappy populist campaign. Pulled together for U.S. Congress and stunned the political world by unseating a powerful incumbent Democrat. I want to remind everyone that AOC, let me go in here a little bit bigger for you. I want to remind everyone that AOC worked with Ted Kennedy. I didn't know that when she was running. All I knew about her background was that she grew up in the Bronx and she went to BU and she was a bartender. And there was something about the bartender thing and the BU connection that really just didn't sit well with me, because the students that graduate from Boston University, having worked there for over 5 years, the students that graduate from BU, they usually go on to pretty good jobs. It's not bartending. I know, I've seen the career placement numbers. So that was kind of weird to me. I'm going to get into that in just a second. So then it goes on to say, let me go down here because this is the part I want to show you. It's towards the bottom. It's just like, I don't know why I fell for it at the time, but I realized looking back on it, like she was really a fraud. Listen to this. This is what she said at BU, and Ken Elmore introduced her. She said, I didn't understand why people called me an activist. I felt like I was just saying things that were very common sense. I would just say, hey, kids in the Bronx should have a good education. And they'd be like, oh, she's an activist. It's just, it's really interesting. Listen to this part. So AOC's father died of lung cancer when she was a sophomore in college. He was 48. Her Puerto Rican mother cleaned houses to support 2 kids, but the money wasn't enough and she had to fight off foreclosure. One of the things I've noticed that's often been left out, and this was mentioned later on after she won, they don't tell you that AOC's dad was an architect. Not only was he an architect, but he was the president of the company. Why wasn't that mentioned when she was running for office? Because they wanted us to have this story of, oh, look at this poor Latina from the Bronx. She came out of poverty and went to BU and she won and now she's a congresswoman. That was the narrative they told. She was a bartender and she did it, so you can do it too. Now, does that story sound more exciting? Absolutely. Absolutely. But that wasn't the truth. That wasn't the truth. So my theory is, and this was something I noticed back then as well, it seemed like to me they put way more focus on AOC when the Justice Democrats were running than they did the other Justice Democrats. I just call it like I see it. She was supposed to be the star. She was supposed to be the one that was actually going to get in. And they make it seem like she didn't have any political connections, but she did have political connections. Now, they bring up the bartender story, but they don't tell you that AOC had a startup. How many of you know this? I'll show you. This is just, I feel like she was fooling us all along. AOC had a startup. The surprising entrepreneurial roots of Democrats' rising star, AOC. Here we go. Let me go down to where they talk about the company. It's a long article, excuse me. Oh, here we go. Okay. Because I knew, like I said, when she went to BU, I'm like, the BU kids usually go on to do a lot of things. Something about that just sound off to me. So here we go. We seek to develop and identify literature in urban areas. So this was her startup. I'm not saying there's anything bad about this startup. I'm not saying there's anything bad about having a startup. What I'm saying is I think it was odd that that was left out of her story and they made it seem like she was just a struggling bartender. That was not true. She launched a publishing venture through a local startup network, Sunshine Bronx Business Incubator, which charges $195 per month for shared workspace and business advice. She went on to encourage investors to support Bronx businesses. I have no problem with that either. Rather than think of it as somewhere to run from, the Bronx is somewhere to invest. In an interview with New York Daily, AOC reportedly spent $1,000 to get her business off the ground and further advocated for a New York City bill that will double tax deductions for new business startup costs, bringing that figure to $5,000 from $5,000 to $10,000. The National Hispanic Institute even named AOC their social entrepreneur in residence, recognizing her commitment to the company and greater Hispanic community. It's that background in particular that gives hope to the business community in New York. So, again, I have no problem with the fact that she started a startup. I have a problem with the fact that that was left out of her story. And they tried to make it seem like she was this poor, struggling girl from the Bronx who was a bartender. There's something flawed with that. There's something flawed with that story and that narrative. I didn't know for a long time that she didn't really grow up in the Bronx per se. I think she started out there, but they moved to York. It's a suburb in New York. They moved to a town. I have it here. It was in Westchester County. I know where that's at. I'm familiar with it. I used to live in New York. And it was so she could attend better schools. So her parents bought a house in Westchester. That's fine. That's fine. This is the thing. I have no problem with any of that. But my question was, why was this left out? And look at this in this article here. This is interesting. Listen to this. AOC took a lot of criticism for allegedly misrepresenting her childhood. Her critics said that AOC had lied about her family's wealth. AOC said that, in fact, she grew up between two worlds and that even though she went to school in Yorktown, she never lost sight of her Bronx roots. That is totally fine. Again, no problem with that. My problem was the lies. So I feel like, to me, AOC feels like a fraud. That is the problem that I have. And then I see the way that she is behaving in Congress, and she is not fighting for us. And that was a progressive who some of us on here canvassed for, who some of us donated money to. So when you think about this event that's happening tonight at 7 o'clock, again, I told you, I have no problem with the people. The problem is the money, the system they're going into, and the other problem is the fact that we do not have a good precedent. Because the group that came before them, the squad, the Justice Democrats, they have not set a good precedent. They have made it tough for the ones who are running now. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Lawrence said, you have to show the Democratic Party that you are ready and willing not to vote for them. That is the only way they will listen to you. Thank you, Lawrence. And Lawrence O'Donnell mentioned that as well. Robin said, that's right, Sabby. What difference does it make where someone pees in the pool? Sabby said, come on, or excuse me, Laura said, come on, Sabby. AOC might cry if you hold her accountable. Troy, thanks so much for the super chat. Sabby, tongue in cheek, you're criticizing AOC. That's violence. Delthea said, if Obama had said to Americans in 2009 to meet him at the Capitol and make Congress vote for real health care, thousands, if not millions, would have come. AOC could do the same, but she won't. No, she won't. And that's what's unfortunate. She has a large platform, particularly on Twitter. All she has to do is send out a tweet and thousands of people would be there. That's the thing. That's the thing.